Hello, I'm William Gallagher, and this is the 58 Keys Script Club. It's like a book club, but it's exclusively about scripts and screenplays. It's always going to be. It's always obviously going to be a script I like a lot. Nearly always. There was one, and it is always going to be a screenplay that is available to read. There's actually one that I'm considering that isn't, but you're not here to watch me ponder that. This time it is available. The script is The Bourne Identity by Tony Gilroy and William Blake Herron. Specifically, that's the film, but the script available is listed as being the Paris draft from the year 2000. And there is another draft floating around credited to just Tony Gilroy, but I read the Paris draft and then skimming through this other one, I can't see a difference. Actually, even some oddities for it, but actually there are oddities. That's one of the reasons I want to talk about this. There's some oddities in the script, yeah, but also differences to look for. This is a dramatisation of the novel by Robert Ludlum. Ludlum? I'm pronouncing that right, I think. And if there were ever a writing rule book, I think that this script and the film that was made for it would be considered wrong. It would be considered a failure. I mean, it was a box office hit. Come on, William. But I mean, a failure in what you might call writing terms, because it's called The Bourne Identity. And it is the first story featuring this character, Jason Bourne. And there's a lot of similarity between it and the novel. But it isn't like the script is in any way a studied version of the novel. It's much more like the script once met the book at a party. It takes simply massive liberties with the novel. And I do think there comes a time when your script is so far removed from the source material, the novel, whatever it is, that it shouldn't have the same name. And this is surely really close to that line, as close as you can get, and maybe it even crosses it, and yet it works. I mean, I'm fine with a lot of changes generally. I completely get it. You're not going to get a whole novel into a 2-hour film, and if you tried, it would be very painful, tedious, unwatchable, really, or unreadable in the script pages. But as long as the spirit of the story is the same, well, I can take just about any change, except this time with The Bourne Identity. I don't really know that even the spirit is the same. I mean, okay, both the script and the novel, they are spy thrillers. They are both about an assassin who gets amnesia and spends the rest of the film, the rest of the novel, trying to find out who he is. There are huge chunks of the novel that are simply ignored in this version, okay? And actually, the novel is more focused on Bourne tracking a villain named Carlos, which is interesting because the novel came out in 1980 and the villain was Carlos. 1980. But in 1974, Jean Le Carré published Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy, in which the ultimate baddie is named Carla. Anyway, there's no scene of Carlos in the 2002 film, nothing. But, okay, chunks of plot regularly get cut for time, okay. The core difference is this. In Robert Ludlum's novel, Jason Bourne is an amnesiac who manages to learn that he's a good guy. In this script and the film that was made from it, of course, Jason Bourne is an amnesiac who manages to learn that he is a bad guy. This is one of those writing ideas that I think is simply brilliant. It's one of those where it's so obviously much more interesting that you don't know, why wasn't it always that way? Now, I should say I can't fairly compare the script version to the novel. I mean, I've tried reading the novel, tried a couple of times really, over the years, and I just can't get into Robert Ludlum's style, or pronounce his name. Plus, I'm only about 20 minutes into The Bourne Identity, the 1988 TV version, which is also a bit tough to get into, but I'll get there with that one, or at least a little further. The TV version, right, from the 80s is in 2 parts, so it's getting on for about 3 hours, a little less. So it has more room than the film, which is about 1 hour 50. And I can see that it is, I mean, vastly more faithful to the novel. It's also just vastly more faithful to the 1980s when it was made. So Richard Chamberlain is Jason Bourne. And that's not now obvious casting. Jacqueline Smith is Marie. It's best available stars at the time. The 1988 version, the TV version, was written by Karol Sobieski, I think it's pronounced, whose work I only otherwise know from Fried Green Tomatoes, the film she co-wrote with Fanny Flagg, and that was based on Flagg's novel, Fried Green Tomatoes at the Whistle Stop Cafe. I adored that film, and I keep meaning to read the novel because of it. I so enjoyed the movie. It's decades now. I'll get round to it. Karol Sobieski also wrote Annie, by the way, the movie based on the stage musical. So, you know, she died in 1990, unfortunately. She was a vastly better writer than I am. But still, I'm going to say in this case, this TV version of Bourne feels like something's pulling it down, weighing it down, slowing it down. Slowing down, that's the phrase I'm looking for. I don't know what it is. I wouldn't go so far as to say that the dialogue is cliche, but it is obvious. And it is all delivered in a very obvious, telegraphed kind of way. I'm going to say something important kind of thing. I'm suffering. And now I'm not. Try watching it after the 2002 film. It is shockingly slow, shockingly. But back to that 2002 film. The Paris draft, right? The script is broadly the same as the final film, bar a last action sequence. Some of it, though, is written to be in different locations that were finally used. And so it's quite interesting. You see the familiar dialogue moved, even as a lot of the rest of the description around it is different. But then I've never seen this in anything else, in any other script. The scenes are sometimes written out like this. They're a note saying that, well, there should be a scene here, it's got to do this or that. It's like a note from the writers to themselves about finishing this bit later. And then there are several sections where the characters are saying X's, a lot of them. Unless it's some pretty deeply researched swearing, it means dialogue will be figured out later. Of course it does. I've never seen that before. It's not like one line saying TBC. It's exchanges back and forth where every line is a row of X's. I have seen scripts list alternative takes. Slow Horses, for example. Script I read from that is replete with multiple versions of lines to be filmed and tried out in the edit. But at least each version is actually there. Okay, if you're making a film, you can do what you like. Well, all right, okay, you're looking at me, budget aside, studio and network aside, whatever, but you know what I mean. So if X's worked for this film, fine. But it is probably the thing that detracts from this screenplay as a reading experience. The best scripts are a great read by themselves, and this falls short of that, I think, because you're thrown out of the story. But it is really interesting to see how it describes the very many action sequences. And speaking of action sequences, this is not in the Paris draft, and fortunately it's not in the finished film either, but there were extensive extra sequences, extra filming sessions done after the rest of principal photography ended, which is not unusual. But in this case, the film was coming out pretty soon after 9/11, and there was actually some worry, some question over whether audiences were in a mood to take a film that featured such violence, so many deaths and things. So a new bookend set of scenes were written and shot. They were setting up the story, framing it in a different way. It's kind of hard to describe how they did it, because the aim was to soften the story, make it all right to watch it. And the result was a series of scenes that, at least out of context, you can see them on the various DVD releases, and I'm sure they're on YouTube somewhere. The scenes seem a bit ordinary, a bit flat, a bit typical. Whereas the script, for the most part, and the film throughout, is unusual. It's refreshing. You can see so clearly how it influenced films that follows, including which one was the next James Bond after it. No question, influenced by this, and was the better for it, I think. One last thing I should say. The film was based on the first of a trilogy of novels, but it was written to be this single, complete film. I mean, they might have hoped for sequels, but it was written to be a one-off. Then, of course, it was such a hit, so a sequel obviously followed. The Bourne Supremacy. I could actually talk about that script too, and I'll link to the available screenplay online, but the only thing I really want to say about it is that this second film, like all sequels, it picks up the story. In fact, it picks up the story from the first film so well that once you've seen the two, you are certain this Bourne story was written to be two films, not one. And then there was a third, The Bourne Ultimatum. And again, it's a standalone film. You don't have to watch the rest, but it works so well. Picking up the story, continuing it and concluding it, kind of shapes off at the end nicely. You would vow all three were written at the same time. It is a remarkable piece of writing across three films in so many years. I mean, they are remarkable pieces of writing in general, I think, but that in particular, I really like. For once, just this once, I hesitate to say that they are also a great read for the reasons I said, but they're very definitely an interesting read, and an instructional read, really. I want them to be great, though. But anyway, for now, that's it for this 58 Keys Script Club. Go read the script, read all three, and while you were doing so, take care of yourself, write more yourself too, and I'll see you soon.